Top IITs and IIMs have formed a consortium to boost the country's Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem through research in innovation and entrepreneurship. To elaborate this further, we have a director roundtable on empowering innovative ecosystem at IITs, IIMs, and NITs. I would like to invite Kartik Sharma, Senior Associate Editor, ET Government, to moderate the discussion.
Hello everyone, I'm Kartik Sharma and I welcome all of you in the ET Government Education, Innovation and Skill Summit, Innovating Education and Educating for Innovation. Today in this one-day summit, we are here to participate in a panel discussion, which is a director's roundtable. And the topic is Empowering Innovation Ecosystem at IITs and IIMs. IITs and IIMs are known as the torchbearers of the technology and innovation ecosystem in the country. The IITs and IIMs have come to symbolize prestige in India today, which can be readily exploited to further innovators and research and create an entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country. While the world is now looking towards a new set of talent pool at the speed of newer and emerging technologies and innovations for the future needs of the industry, IITs and IIMs have to create inquisitive minds for the entrepreneurial ecosystem and empower future innovators in India to cater to the global workforce and future-ready skilled manpower. To realize Prime Minister's vision of making India Atmanirbhar, these prestigious institutes can play a phenomenal role in converting innovation into economic growth in the motto of self-reliance and make in India. Similarly, as an emerging economy, we have to promote the growing startup ecosystem of the country. Thus, IITs and IIMs need to incentivize novel technologies, research, and prototype on the lines of the Silicon Valley and incubation. So, with all these thoughts, I think we'll be discussing on all these aspects today in this panel discussion, the directors roundtable with eminent speakers, the leaders in this space, joining us in this panel discussion. Firstly, I'll introduce each of the speaker here, and then we'll start the discussion. I would like to introduce Professor Rishikesh T. Krishnan, Director of IIM Bangalore. Welcome, sir. And then Professor Subhasis Chaudhuri, Director of IIT Bombay. Professor Ajit Kumar Chaturvedi, Director of IIT Roorkee. And Professor Himanshu, Director of IIM Indore. And I'm Kartik Sharma, Senior Associate Editor at ET Government. I'll be moderating the discussion. So firstly, I would like to take the initial remarks from all these speakers on their views on empowering innovation ecosystem at IITs and IIMs to create further innovators and research and entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country. So I'll start with the Professor Rishikesh T. Krishnan, Director of IIM Bangalore. What are your thoughts on this, Professor?
Yeah, thank you, Kartik, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. Well, as you rightly suggested, the IITs and IIMs have a big role to play in furthering the innovation ecosystem. Speaking specifically about IIM Bangalore, we have had an incubator on campus for over 20 years now. When it started, of course, it was quite small. At that time, incubation was not very well understood. But things have really changed in the last 6 or 7 years, I would say since 2014 or so. Now we have really vibrant innovation ecosystem just centered on our incubator at the NS Raghavan Center for Entrepreneurial Learning. We are playing a role in multiple ways. We run a lot of very impactful entrepreneurship education programs. But particularly, we are involved with Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Entrepreneurs Program. We run our own Women's Startup Program as well. Along with the National Commission for Women, last year we ran a program to help 6,000 women entrepreneurs get their enterprises off the ground. So over time, one niche we have got focused on is the women entrepreneurship sector. And apart from that, we have now some focused initiatives in new technologies like fintech, mobility, etc. So in fintech, we are working very closely with ICICI. In mobility, we are working very closely with Maruti Udyog. So essentially, we are trying to promote and support a whole lot of startups in these arenas. The objective, of course, is not just to promote startups, but also to help the startups benefit from the. And we, of course, have all our professors and students who are doing lots of interesting things in all these domains. And we do our best to connect them to the enterprises so that the enterprises can benefit from the expertise we have internally. Finally, I must say we also have a strong focus on entrepreneurship within the institute for our students. We introduced entrepreneurial mindset as a compulsory course in the MBA program a few years ago. We've always had interest in entrepreneurship, but we are now making a more deliberate effort to promote entrepreneurship and innovation by our students. So that gives you a kind of overview of at least the role we are playing in promoting the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think being a management institute, one of the premier management institutes of the country, I think a good start a student of IIM can get from here in terms of innovating for their startup and entrepreneurial journey. And when we talk about an IIT, I think these students who are genius in their studies have a talent, and then they join IIT. I would like to request Professor Subhasis Chaudhuri, Director of IIT Bombay, one of the renowned institutes, that how an IIT can groom a student to be an entrepreneur, and how can you empower the innovation ecosystem in the country through your students, Professor?
So thanks, Kartik. I think, I would like to go back a little in time, okay, to look at the IIT system as such. It's about 60 odd years old. If you, of course, Roorkee has a longer history. But if you look at when IIT started, initially, I would call the first 30 years of IIT evolution is about, IIT 1.0, which was more of teaching, creating of the bottom of the pyramid, top class manpower. These were like typical mandate that IIT Bombay or any other IIT, as a matter of fact, they did that. Okay. Then the next 30 years in its journey, if you look at that, I would call it IIT 2.0. Okay. Which is when the research got into the key thing. So of course, doesn't mean that one of the objectives of 1.0 still remains. That's the best quality teaching. But you move to the second part where you do the research part of it, because you have to create a deep tech, whatever now we call it deep tech. Those terms were not there those days, but actually, this is where it was needed to create that little top on the pyramid. Now, another 30 years, which is right now, maybe I think last 8-10 years, I would say, this is what we call the IIT 3.0, which actually goes for the innovation and the entrepreneurial kind of activities. That's what is the primary focus, okay, without compromising again on 1.0 and 2.0, okay, because this is the additional focus. Now, the thing is, if you look at today, okay, we have created manpower, we have created the technology. The question is, how do you leverage them? We have these people, right? So what we had 1 and 2.0, these are now what we call like a backstage activity. You front end them with 4 specific verticals. That's what we want in our system. Is of course, all of them geared towards how to do the innovation and materializing them in terms of the entrepreneurship. So first of all, okay, we created entrepreneurship. So basically, it's a little jumbled up or maybe a little anachronic development, I could say, that we started our journey about 17 years ago with this incubator called SIGN, Society for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which is one of the most probably very, very highly acknowledged thing. And today is that all these companies which are there, like 180 odd companies that we incubated, out of that 40 of them folded up, 140 are still there. And the collective valuation of all these companies which are still in existence is around $2.5 billion today. Okay. Now, so it has picked up. We encourage our students, even in certain cases, second year students who are undergraduate, they wanted, but like leave, long-term leave. Our system doesn't permit, but we did permit them, saying that, okay, if you get something like, good competition, some program, and time is now. If you don't give them permission right now to leave, I think that, after 2 years, that opportunity cannot exist. So if you want to have at that point is this entrepreneurial activities in terms of the setting up companies, what are the, suddenly it doesn't happen. You have to create an ecosystem around that. So what would be the corresponding ecosystem, right? So you need to have an entrepreneurship cell where actually people are formally trained also. So we have created the Desai Sethi School of Entrepreneurship, which also not only teaching our own students for many years now in the undergraduate and the postgraduate level, many courses, okay, but at the same time, we want to take it in the next year to the people outside IIT in terms of giving executive programs there. But that's what you're training. Then comes the research part, where once you do this, like once you graduate from this entrepreneurship, where do they go? So I need a research part, okay, a technology part. So even that we have done it. Okay, so these are the three strong verticals is required, but we need one more. And that is what is the focus that we are trying to drive now. That when, all these research that I told you, the back end activity which is happening, so that generates the knowledge, right? And there, or maybe you're trying a prototype. So they are at a tier level, maybe 1, 2, 3, or something like this. Okay. But is if you want to go to our incubator, or maybe at some level where you go and like license it to the outside, okay, whatever, or you want to get sold to somebody, you need to have the tier level boosted to at least 7, 8, 9, that kind of thing you need, right? Now, the question is that nobody in the academic scenario talks about what happens to these 4, 5, 6, right? So that's what actually the death valley, okay, in the academic system. So we have to have a TRL booster. So this is something very important because our students, they come, they ideate something, they verify the concept, and then they leave because that's their job. The student must leave IIT at some point. So we are working on that. And based on that, we'll have the overall system, hopefully, which will actually cater to all aspects. And finally, that will lead to wealth creation for the nation. I'll stop here right now.
Right, I think rightly explained, Professor Ashish. And here I would now another IT is here, one of the renowned institutes, not only in the country but the world. Director of IT Roorkee is here, Professor Ajit Kumar Chaturvedi. Sir, I would like to request to share your initial remarks on the same thing, that how students can come up with they can be encouraged for more innovative ideas, and how innovation can be empowered through the eminent institutes like IITs, and especially the IIT Roorkee. And we request you to share your thoughts on the same, Professor Ajit, please.
Thank you, Kartik. So last 10 years, I believe that a lot of the hard work in this space has been accomplished in terms of improving the level of awareness of this entire space, because unless we realize that this space itself is built of several small blocks, only then we will be in a position to realize the optimum combination of these blocks so as to be able to create successful startups, or to be able to transform innovation in terms of business success. Traditionally, the cultural values of any academic system across the globe have been like writing good publications, good research papers, producing good quality doctoral thesis. And that is what gives a lot of satisfaction, a lot of peer recognition to the teachers. And when students also choose that option, they also naturally derive a lot of satisfaction from that. But then last 10 years, this realization has sunk in that, okay, this is not enough, or this is not where we should rest. We definitely need to take the next step in terms of demonstrating to the world that this innovation also has a market potential. This innovation also has a business program, business idea. And then we started realizing that yes, engineering alone, technology alone can take you this far, but not up to the end of the road. You have to bring in that acumen to identify the gaps in the market, to be able to do the hard work of finding the money that can fund your innovation in terms of prototypes which are more recognizable outside the lab, creating prototypes in the lab which are understood by the peer group is one step, but that step will not create a product which will be saleable in the market. Now, because this kind of awareness has grown, so what is happening is people are becoming more and more hungry and focused that, okay, can I do something? Can I get funding from the institute, from outside, so that I can boost what my predecessor, Professor Chaudhuri, was mentioning, technology readiness level. If you ask me 7-8 years back, this TRL word itself was unknown. It may have been coined maybe 15 years back, 20 years back, I don't know. But now you go to a fourth year student, he's talking about his TRL. So that kind of awareness, and this awareness is not limited to one academic campus. There is a complete ecosystem. There is a complete diffusion of ideas. People know that, well, IITX is doing this, IITY is doing this, IITR is doing this, and they catch up, they build upon it. If you ask in terms of specific initiatives at IIT Roorkee, we have this technology business incubator called TIDES. And every year TIDES is doing better and better. But we continue to be hungry for more. We believe that we are much below than what the true potential of IIT Roorkee is. And we are also trying to lead the ecosystem in terms of the area surrounding us. So our TIDES business incubator allows not only innovation from within the institute, but also if there is a good idea that can be brought into the campus from outside, that is also welcome. And we used our Greater Noida Extension Center to accelerate this activity. So core science and technology can happen here. More in terms of business and outreach can happen from the Greater Noida Extension Center. We have created some very small initiatives, but they're all collectively playing a very huge role. For example, every Sunday in IIT Roorkee, to the entire faculty and student community, there is a newsletter that goes. And this newsletter is focused only on incubation. And it is timed to be sent on Sunday. So Sunday afternoon, you can expect that all IIT Roorkee faculty, students, everybody will get what any IIT Roorkee alumni has achieved in the last 1 week, what any IIT Roorkee faculty has achieved, or what interesting thing has happened even beyond IIT Roorkee. So that way we are creating a kind of more and more sort of things that, okay, there are success stories, because it is very easy to fail in this space. There are many examples which have not been successful. And we don't want them to become role models. We want people to realize that, okay, 2 failures, after that you succeed. And to be able to give this kind of inspiration to the students, there is a regular stream of alumni visiting the campus who have gone through this journey last 10 years, last 15 years, 20 years, successful alumni, people who have failed and then succeeded. We bring them to the campus, they talk about it, students throng to their talks. Of course, COVID has played a double-edged sword, because while many people are able to give the lectures who would not have otherwise come to the campus because it is not physically so accessible, but at the same time, that one-to-one face interaction we are sort of missing out on that. And one more thing that I think I would might like to mention in the opening remarks, that we have created a new academic program. And to the best of our knowledge, this academic program is the first in the country. It is known as a Master in Innovation Management. So this program has been launched just last year. We have brought our design department and management department together to conceive this program. And we are hoping to produce people who will focus only on innovation management. For example, maybe tomorrow IIT Roorkee will have an innovation officer also, because this is now a full-time job. I mean, we cannot leave it only to faculty members or deans or associate deans. Managing innovation is a big time job. Doing innovation is, of course, very important. That is the basic, that is the fundamental. But how do you manage it? And there we want to bring in this innovation officer or this masters of innovation management who can come and play an important role. Let me stop here for that.
Thank you so much, Professor Ajit. And I think 2 things you have rightly mentioned, that engineering is not enough. Only engineering is not enough, and innovation management is very important. So with this, I'll come to Professor Himanshu Rai. Management is very important, Professor. And when it is IIM in Institute of Management, how do you see a role of an IIM to actually take these things in concern of a student comes from IIT or from some other institute to IIM, how they can manage their innovation, so that whatever it is, like funding or we spoke about TRL. So how an IIM can groom a person as an entrepreneur or as an innovator?
So there are a couple of things that we do at IIM Indore. So one of the things that we have done is we have converted our incubation center into a Section 8 company, and we call it the IIM Indore Incubation Foundation. So now going forward, we can actually attract funds and we can actually seed the projects based on the ideas that our students have. So that's one piece of the puzzle. And the second thing, and it's so exciting to see that you have brought together directors from IIT and IIM, because even I believe that innovation is going to happen on the boundaries of these two fields. And therefore, last year, we signed an MOU with IIT Indore. So we happen to be in a unique position, being the only city which has both an IIM and an IIT. And now we are going for joint incubation as well. So a person can do a joint incubation where he or she looks at the technical aspect at IIT Indore, whereas they get the managerial and mentorship from IIM Indore. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle is that, like what Professor Chaturvedi said, that he's looking at people who are also around. What we also look at is the local ecosystem. And Indore has a very strong MSME presence. And therefore, what we do is we have had it for a long time, but we are further strengthening it. We have a general management program for executives for the entrepreneurs from this MSME section. And our faculty members also provide mentorship to the local industry bodies as well as to local startups. So that's the second piece of the puzzle. And third piece of the puzzle that we are trying to kind of put in is to actually make students practice things that they learn in the classroom. So not only do we have courses on entrepreneurship, we also have an entrepreneurship track. So if in our PGP course, if somebody wants to take an entrepreneurship track, then the person does not have to do all the electives in the second year. The student only has to do half the electives, and the other half, the student actually works on the idea and the faculty evaluate him or her based on that particular idea. So that's one thing that we have done. And the second thing is that every venture which is inside the IIM Indore campus, which means all the shops, all the food stalls, etc., they all run by the students. And then when they graduate, they actually sell it over to the incoming batch, and thereby actually, so to say, get their hands dirty and learn the nuances of entrepreneurship. So these are the three pieces that we have put together at IIM Indore.
That's great to know, Professor Himanshu, director from IIM Indore. I will now request Professor Rishikesh Krishnan to throw some light on this one very important topic which needs to be discussed when you talk about innovations, that Government of India's vision of self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and Make in India, a very ambitious scheme. So how do you evaluate the IITs and IIMs, to convert the innovation into economic growth and, to realize this motto of self-reliance and Make in India? Your thoughts on this, Professor?
So as Professor Chaudhuri explained quite well in the historical evolution of IITs, it's quite clear that the institutes in general now have come to the stage where they're quite actively looking at getting involved in translating ideas into more practical applications. Traditionally, a lot of research projects in all our institutes, both IITs and IIMs, were chosen more on the basis of whether they will give rise to a good publication or some research output. But now I think many faculty and students are actively looking at what are the potentials of converting these ideas into commercial applications. To my mind, that's a very important development. And we have seen that happening on a big scale during the COVID pandemic. COVID pandemic, in a way, provided an opportunity for the faculty and students to demonstrate their ability to do things in a practical way. And I think across all institutes, we have seen ventilators, we saw personal protective equipment, we've seen test kits, we've seen lots of things across multiple institutes in the country. In IIM, we are not so much into core technology. So more of our effort has been on things like modeling the spread of the pandemic and looking at how we can improve the supply chain of oxygen and things like that, which are more up our alley. But I think the COVID pandemic gave everybody a reason to focus on these practical applications. And I hope that will be sustained in the time to come. What's also happened, which is useful, is the government has started playing a more proactive coordinating role in identifying needs and trying to match those needs to the capabilities of people in the institutes. Earlier, there was a bit of a problem in making those connections, but luckily during COVID, because there was an urgent requirement, there are various bodies, committees, consortium, various things have got formed which make these connections much stronger. So assuming that we can sustain these connections beyond the pandemic, I see quite a bright future for more practical and commercial applications coming out of all our institutes. Of course, in each institute, it will be aligned with what are the capabilities and strengths. So what happens in an IIT will be quite different from what happens in an IIM. But in general, this whole idea that things need to be finding some application in the real world, that has got a lot of legitimacy in the last 20 months.
Right, Professor. Great to know that you are quite hopeful and positive towards a bright future in terms of you also the commercial applications coming up with innovations. I'll request you to throw some light on this, Professor Chaudhuri, that how Indian talent can be used with innovations to realize these missions of Government of India of self-reliance or making.
So I agree with, Professor Krishnan on what you said, that if you look at the talent pool, there is a huge talent pool available. Okay, be it IITs and, like in India produces so many of these, science STEM educated people. And if you assume 10% of them have to be very good, so then naturally that itself is several, more than millions, per year. Okay. So talent is definitely there. So they have to be, one is training proper, and second thing to align them with what is the vision, right, of the nation. Now, the question is that if you look at, we are talking it in terms of not just training at this point, but we're talking with respect to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, as well as creating on the more things, which is on the high tech, which is the Atmanirbhar, right? Now, there is one aspect I can tell you that if you look at today, the way the business models is happening, I mean, if you just look at the recent set of IPOs that has come out in probably last couple of months. Now, what do you see there? Okay, it's very interesting, right? So you find that those were the platform providers. The rate of return of your investment, your effort, is a lot more than when you go into the deep tech, okay, or something. Now, when you talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, you are not talking about those services. You're talking about something which is a real product, okay, which could be deep tech, which could be of socially impactful, which could be on the energy, which could be on anything, right? So what happens is that if you look at those particular sectors, okay, of course, you may call it like is a trading platforms or whatever, which probably gives you a lot more, the return in a quick start, and you could become billionaire in a few months. Okay, that's possible. But if you look at the deep tech, the engagement and the kind of the risk that you have is a lot more. Okay, and that's why the engagement has to be deeper. There has to be companies, okay, which we should, IITs and others should handle. And you have to realize another thing is that there are in India, you have a few very big companies which can, of course, they are, high-tech companies and they can do wonderful things, a lot of MNCs. But the core of Indian dependence is actually the MSMEs, okay? Because if you have to really look into that one. Now, the question is that how do you enable them to go forward, right? So it could be purely on, working with them to provide a solution that they need, which because sometimes the problem, these are all at a level where they may not even know what is the kind of solution they need to take it forward. So even studying the problem, whereas if you're working with some bigger companies, okay, probably they know it very well that this is what we need. If nothing is available, I can go and get it licensed from somewhere else. Okay, so the issue is a lot deeper. Okay, so when you talk about Atmanirbhar or any kind of thing which is a product based, okay, then your rule of engagement has to be very, very different from a pure entrepreneurial activities. Okay, it has to be the nation as a whole, the government has to have that, in some sense, planned properly to how to help them. Fortunately, if you look at the recent STIP, Science, Technology and Innovation Policy, it tries to help on it. And the government also is trying to set up many COEs, the Center of Excellences and others, which are on the tech side. So you work out a solution. And at that time, you can bring in all these companies and together you can work. For example, if you have to work today on solving certain problems, whether it's, let's say, EV is one, you need to develop the technology, which is a long-standing process, right? And you have to make it for the Indian scenario. So for that, I think the IITs and some of the other, those tech institutions are the right kind of thing. So at IIT Bombay, what we try to do is that we are creating various kinds of, the center of excellences because we know the solution could require expertise from many areas. So one particular person doesn't solve the entire thing. Okay, so you need them, you bind them together with a common kind of a focus and say that this is it. I'll try to connect you with some kind of companies. If there are some government funding, very good. You try to do it work over a longer period. I think the term longer is very, very important because if you are very, very time conscious and if you want a quick turnaround, I'm sorry to say that deep tech or any kind of product, it will not work. Okay, we have to realize the ground realities, and many times we are successful. And Prof. Krishnan mentioned very well, like during the COVID time, there have been a lot of things that happened, which is in a quick time. But if you, let's say, for example, IIT Bombay, when, in the peak time, in the second wave, there was a lot of need for, this oxygen, and the nation was grasping for air, right? Some of our faculty members, they worked out like the existing nitrogen plants, generating plants, which are almost many places in almost at district level. So what you do is that you have a quick innovation in terms of changing the filter design. What is the filter inside? And they were made oxygen generator. Okay. Now, definitely it solves the problem. Okay, for that time. But that's not like what you call like a final solution to solving the problem. Okay. So you need a longer kind of thing. You need focus. You need people. Okay, we need to handle with the industry, and even the partnership has to be strong. Then, of course, I think, but it has started happening, and I think there are many cases. I'm happy to say that these are there very much, and many of the faculty members, as students, they're very keen. They're socially conscious, and they are also very much, I think, I would say, quite knowledgeable about the fact that there is this drive by the government on the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and I'm sure that gradually things will improve. Okay, definitely there are a lot of opportunities. Thank you.
Right, and I think you were rightly said, Professor Subhasis, that it's a long-term process. You need hand-holding, and you need, and it's happening also in current scenario. I would like to ask Professor Ajit Chaturvedi, Director from IIT Roorkee. Sir, I would like to know from you that how the same question, the innovations that you are promoting, that you're incubating, how can they, give economic growth to the country?
Let me dwell on two aspects which are probably, if I may say, the roadblocks in unleashing the full potential of IITs or maybe of India. The first that I view is a cultural ethos. We get very fascinated by knowledge, by some interesting science, understanding the phenomena. That kind of fascination for generating money is not there. And this is a deep cultural issue, and I know that I'm not the best expert to talk about it, but I'm acutely aware that this is sitting somewhere at the root of the problem. That we do not want to view people who generate wealth as our icons, as our sort of role models. In fact, in 1992, I think, when the then government of India gave Bharat Ratna to Tata, J.R.D. Tata, that was probably a very turning point in the country's thinking, that yes, we must come forward and recognize business leaders We must recognize people who had the acumen to translate things into successful business ventures, and they generate wealth. So the hunger for creating successful business ventures is very important to be able to become an Atmanirbhar Bharat. That realization is I think, probably not as much as I would have liked to have, because in IITs, naturally, because that is our bread and butter, we are too fascinated with the innovation part, and we get very happy with that, rightly so, nothing wrong with that. But then the hunger for the next part seems to be not as much as the hunger for the first part. That is the hunger to show to the peer group that this is exciting. But that exciting thing does not realize the true potential, and Atmanirbhar Bharat will not happen in the lab. Atmanirbhar Bharat will happen through successful business ventures. So these are the sort of two things that some kind of a cultural shift has to come in the mindset of our country, of our youth, that just like generating knowledge is very important, it must continue to hold a very high pedestal for all of us. Similarly, generating wealth is also something that is very important for the country. We must not hesitate, we must not shy away from praising people who get into this mode of generating wealth, becoming rich. I mean, becoming rich should not be seen as something that is not necessary, or that is not something that as if it's something that is not a desirable goal. I mean, that kind of thing probably is sort of hurting the entire country ecosystem, because there is no dearth of talent. That I completely agree with all my panelists, that talent is not the issue, but the hunger in the right direction. And if you sit in, for example, I'll give you some example. If you sit in these meetings where we decide which incubators, which business, which technology should be funded, which startups should be given the initial funding, seed funding, you see the presentation is completely focused on the innovation part. I mean, it is so focused on the innovation that that this part has been completely lost. Where is the market for it? What is the kind of investment required? If suppose this goes into the market, where is the backup option to support this product? What kind of thing is there? Which is important. Without that, Atmanirbhar Bharat will not happen. So that is, I think, something that all of us need to dwell upon and see what we can do.
Right, Professor Chaturvedi, and I think on the similar lines, Professor Chaudhuri also mentioned the same thing, that you need to take the innovation to the next level. I think we rightly said that first part is important, yes, but second part is also important. Professor Himanshu, Director of IIM Indore, I would like to ask you that, as Professor Chaturvedi said, that hunger for business venture is needed. So where this hunger will come from?
See, it's absolutely fascinating that Professor Chaturvedi, mentioned J.R.D. Tata, because one of the ironic things is that we have always put those people on pedestal who distributed wealth. And one of the things that J.R.D. always said was that to distribute wealth, you first need to create it. I mean, if you don't create wealth, what are you going to really distribute? And therefore, going ahead with what Professor Chaudhuri also said, that we look for what is it that is preventing us from becoming Atmanirbhar. So what are the stumbling blocks and the roadblocks in the Atmanirbhar Bharat? To me, and what we have figured out at IIM Indore, there are these 3-4 issues. One is the issue of income inequality. Till such time that we have income inequality in this country, we are not going to succeed. And like what Professor Chaudhuri mentioned, that the focus has to be on the MSMEs. And within MSMEs, for example, in Madhya Pradesh, 90% of them are micro enterprises. And therefore, we will need to focus on them if we want to create a prosperous Bharat. The second are the rural issues. So 833 million people in India live in the villages. I mean, you need to wrap your head around this number. This is more than the population of the United States and Europe combined. And therefore, you need to figure out how are you going to make them wealthier? How are you going to promote an entrepreneurial mindset in them? The third is the pressure on the urban infrastructure. So since you have people moving in from the rural areas to the urban areas, there's a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, look at Mumbai. Right now, Mumbai is almost coming apart on its seams. Chennai, right now with the flood situation, etc., the infrastructure is actually overwhelmed. And therefore, like what Rishi said, that we all have to do what we are the best at. So, for example, we at IIM Indore are trying to solve some of the urban problems. And one of the urban problems that we have picked up is the traffic issue. So by actually looking at the traffic flow, etc., and by creating a framework of environment, education, engineering, enforcement, we are trying to solve the traffic problem. We have already suggested a solution for the city of Indore, and likewise, we are going to suggest solutions for other cities as well. And obviously, the pandemic has taught us that health is going to be another component. If you want an Atmanirbhar Bharat, you will need to create a healthy Bharat as well. Healthy has to be first, only then we can have a wealthy Bharat. And therefore, health needs a lot of attention and whatever we can do. So, for example, we are collaborating with the AstraZeneca to do some research on some of the diseases where we can provide managerial inputs, we can look at the socioeconomic cost of those diseases, and then we can actually suggest to the government. We have to work with the government and we have to make sure that we work with all the partners that we can, so that together in a collaborative mode, we can address all of these issues. So I think the moment we start addressing these issues based on the strength that we have institutionally, we would be able to contribute to the Atmanirbhar Bharat.
That's great. I think that's a very positive view from your side. And here, all the panelists are hopeful for a bright future. But lastly, let's have a last round of discussion and let's discuss on the technology part. How I request you to just give your views on incentivizing the technology. Is it important for an institute like IIT or IIM to incentivize the novel technology, the research and development, the prototypes, like which happens, in other countries, the developed countries? So I'll request Professor Krishnan from IIM Bangalore to share your views on this.
Yeah, thanks, Kartik. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by incentivize, but I think we do have several schemes already in place to support innovation and entrepreneurship. Luckily, many of the schemes of the government are anyway operated through our incubators. So almost all our institutes now have good functioning incubators. Department of Science and Technology, Ministry of Electronics and IT, and hopefully other ministries also will join, are already supporting seed funds for many of the startups. For example, the DST startups necessarily have to be focused on technology development. So that's inbuilt into the whole scheme. So we are already doing a good job of channelizing the government money into some of the promising startups. There are several other things that institutes can do, and I think Himanshu gave a good example. We are trying to, for example, help students who already want to pursue entrepreneurship by making our programs more flexible. I think Professor Chaudhuri also talked about how IIT Bombay is doing that. So that's another way in which we are trying to, maybe more than incentivize, we are trying to remove obstacles and roadblocks, which is equally important, and trying to make sure that all these ideas and everything bloom much better than what they were before. I think there are government schemes already which look at innovation in an end-to-end manner. The Department of Biotechnology probably has the best program through BIRAC, which is a end-to-end for different types of entities, whether you are a startup, whether you are in an academic institution, whether you are a large company. They have schemes to support technology development and innovation across, right from the early stage to development to taking it to commercialization throughout the entire cycle. So we've already established in the country several good frameworks to how to do all these activities. And now these just need to be scaled up in a bigger way. And all our institutions are very actively involved in working in all these government programs. So I think the incentives are sort of there in place. I just think we need to be able to take more of these ideas and sort of make them move forward. A lot of our ideas sort of in a way get stuck. I think this was explained earlier quite well by Professor Chaudhuri at these earlier technology readiness levels. The challenge now is to push them forward so that they get closer to the application and commercialization level. And there, I think there's also a need to get more funding in through corporate CSR, through philanthropic foundations, because in many of these, the cycle time is much longer than in a typical venture. And some of the existing venture capital models don't fit very well with that time duration. So we need to find more ways of getting in financial resources to help take these ideas forward. That's my impression on whatever you're talking about, incentivization of basically innovation and technology development.
Yes, Professor, you picked it right, and I think explained it well. Professor Chaudhuri, you said that innovations are happening, but we need to complete the cycle. They are not. We have to make them commercially viable and all that. So, what to do for that? What is the solution?
I think you talked about incentivizing, so maybe I can so I can take it up from where because you nicely summarized that. So most of the institutions are doing whatever the best they can do, but if you look at this entire cycle to be completed, right? Now the question is that how do you do that? Let's say, for example, the gestation period could be very different for different types of technology. Okay, if you look at, not only that, there are processes. Let's say, I mean, if you have seen the cases like vaccines and all, and there is even though there was like a fast tracking and all, but these are all like emergency certifications, right? So if it is bio, the gestation period is very long. Okay, if it is something which is a very technology intensive as a deep tech, there is also fairly large number. If it is probably service, it may not be so much. Okay. Now the question is that also you look at, so there is one, the time. So all these innovations, they run at different time cycle. The clock rate is different. That's what I'm trying to say. Second thing that you do is that all these innovations, in order to bring it to the market, another thing, you need funding, right? Now the question is that, I mean, this is like, if you call it an incentivizing, who would fund it? Now, let's say, supposing I have enough money, then who would I fund it? Where I get a quick return, I get the maximum return, right? That would be any venture capitalist or anybody would do that, right? If that happens, then some of these cases would be very difficult to run, right? For example, like, I would not want to wait for 10 years for my money to come back to me because I may not live that long. I mean, particularly the pandemic going on, you don't know, right? Similarly, if you look for somebody else, like, the technology, so it has to be something different. So there is like accounting of the cost model into the system so that you start delivering as a process. If you do it, let's say something has to be done. I need some quick return. I need mid-term return. I need long-term return. But preferably, most cases, there is a quick out, from the market by selling it out or something. This is what most people do, or all these angel investors would do. So the question is that some of the big problems like MSMEs and others, it's not happen like this. So there has to be a separate mechanism, which is probably not look for profit as something for which you are investing. So this is like, for example, when you invest in some kind of infrastructures or other, which, let's say, if you look at it in the United States in 1962 or something, it's a huge amount of money they put in for infrastructure, particularly, the transport road, all their highways and other things, right? They did not look for anything in return because that was like a state putting it. But look at that, how much it paid back over the years. So it pays back in a different way. So it's not that, see, finally, you have to look at what is the payback into the system. Do I pay back right from the company? Like when I sell a mobile, I need how much money I get it back from there. Is that how I account? No. For a state and others, it has to be completely different model. So I amortize over different kind of things so that of course, the state needs money, right? So I do it, I distribute it, and things, some of them, I think that's the plan we need. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen all the time because there is always a pressure that I need to solve yesterday's problem. Okay, like if you look at the most of the city infrastructures and others, and we are stuck in that process, right? So until you have little head start, we are not able to think beyond. I think this is the typical problem, and which keeps us in the always process, going back and how do I solve this problem? So I hope that we need a kind of concrete planning, which would be a little long term, not like a really short term. Then actually we'll see a lot of these benefits coming, which are really, really deep tech and other things. I think that's what I would probably recommend.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Chaudhuri, for your remark. And I'll request you, Mr. Professor Ajit Chaturvedi, Lecturer of IIT Roorkee, to share on your thoughts. As you said that there's a lot to be done. One of the things is that there should be hunger for business venture. So finally, share your views on how finally it can be done, how we can actually empower the innovation ecosystem and can convert them into commercially successful entities.
If I put myself in the shoes of an innovator, what I see is that government support is definitely there. In fact, there are a large number of schemes from not only ministries, but also from big public sector undertakings. For example, ONGC, GAIL, they're all oil, this All India Corporation. Everywhere you go, the people are there to thinking about how they can spark innovation, whether to help their own sector or whether to help any sector at large. So support is there. People know that schemes are there, and I can go and get the funding for it. But if you look at the funding that is available beyond the government, for example, private sector funding or venture capitalists or things like that, that is also required to be able to sustain the innovation into a successful venture. Because you cannot do it only on the basis of government funding. It comes with several strings attached. Now, what happens is that the innovator is somewhat handicapped in terms of finding the right set of agreements, right set of terms and conditions that different investors are asking for. How much of the equity can he give? What is the right intellectual property sharing model? I filed a patent. Now there is an idea here. Okay, now I have to file patents in multiple countries to be able to make sure that I have my property is protected. So the point I'm coming to is that there are lots and lots of legal issues involved. And if these can be eased out, the innovator can focus more on the innovation part and the business part. To be able to get a steady stream of financial support, which is there available, but I think the typical innovators get too much entangled in multiple things, and so it somehow loses focus despite the availability of this. It is like I'm in an ocean, I don't have water to drink, so because it's all salinated water. So what I'm saying is that there are issues that are really plaguing our innovators. They need hand-holding in terms of navigating through the complete setup, legal setup in terms of all these terms and conditions, and to be able to make use of the best available funding source. For example, if you look at whether MIT, whether DST, whether Agni, those schemes are there. These schemes, they regularly publicize themselves. They, especially in academic institutions, there's a full plethora of emails, flyers floating around. This scheme to support this scheme to support innovation. What probably needs to be done more is that these schemes should now come back and say, this successful venture was created from my funding. Now, each of these flyers and schemes that are coming out from the government, they should also identify some role models, some heroes, some successful ventures which are created of this. And maybe they can start pushing them also. That if you use this opportunity, maybe you can get this journey, you can get on the path to this journey. So that kind of more and more successful people can come forward. And hopefully this ecosystem will get slightly more cleaned up. I think there is some kind of a disentanglement required to be, so that the innovator can focus on not on everything that innovation management required, but on two or three core things, and the rest can be taken care of, including funding.
Thank you, Professor Chaturvedi. And now, Professor Himanshu, I request you to please throw some light on how these innovations can be more commercially viable. How can we see more startups and more even IPOs, such innovators?
So, the incentivization, like Rishi mentioned, that incentives are already in place in the ecosystem that IIMs work in. So, for example, at IIM Indore, we have the concept of seed money, which is provided to all the faculty, and any faculty with any idea. They can take the seed money and conduct their research. We also have something called the Young Research Faculty Chair, where a substantial amount of money is given to the faculty over a period of 3 years to spend on any project that they wish to. Subsequent to that, if any student, any faculty wants a particular software, hardware, or any book, there are no questions asked. We just make it available. And I think the third element is the most important. I mean, what is education? Sa vidya ya vimuktaye. Education is one that liberates. And I think the best thing that we can do as an institute of higher education is to create an environment which allows our students to innovate, which allows our student to actually match up to their true potential and lights up that fire of entrepreneurial zeal inside them. So like I talked about the entrepreneurship track that we have in our postgraduate program, likewise, we have an integrated program in management where the students spend 3 years doing the undergrad part and then move on to the MBA part. What we did was we created a scope for a sabbatical up to 2 years between these two. So after their undergraduate, they can actually go try out an entrepreneurial journey as well for up to 2 years and then come back into our system, should they wish to, or they can continue with their entrepreneurial journey. And the third thing that we did was we said that, hey, what is it that students need today to actually become more innovative? So like what Professor Chaturvedi spoke about, the Masters in Innovation Management, just 4 days back with IIT Indore, we signed an MOU. And in this academic year itself, we are going to launch a joint degree, a master's degree in data science and management. And this is a joint degree where the faculty of IIT and IIM are going to come together and train people in skills, train students in skills which we believe are required in the post-fourth industrial revolution world, particularly to from a perspective of innovation as well. So to me, provide an enabling environment, make sure that you have everything in place that anybody needs, be it the faculty, be it the students, and channelize the incentives and the funds and the resources that you have in the right direction. And that, I believe, is the key.
Perfect. So it was a wonderful discussion, and I think we have a bright future. We can realize from this panel discussion and these eminent institutes like IITs and IIMs. I think leaving no stone unturned to incubate and nurture these young talents and innovators and budding big entrepreneurs of the country. And we are looking forward to it, and we wish all the best to you who are leading these institutes and doing some great job. Thank you so much. And here for audience, we close this discussion, and we'll come up with more such discussions in future. But here I'll take your leave, and thank you so much, eminent panelists, Professor Krishnan, Professor Chaudhuri, Professor Himanshu Roy, and Professor Chaturvedi for this wonderful and insightful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for covering all the aspects of the topic. Certainly a very thought-provoking session. Let's proceed further to more such discussions. Stay with us as we'll take a short break.